Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, I'm going to be asking the question, do the Maple Leafs need more toughness? And I made a video about this way back when, and I said no in that video, and I'm going to kind of walk back my train of thought there, but I'm going to use the same kind of line of thinking to answer this question now with a different perspective. And what sparked the idea for this video was the video that I made the other day talking about the 2003-2004 Toronto Maple Leafs and how that team was kind of constructed. And this was that 2003-2004 team. Now, the lines might not be exact here, but there was some real tough SOBs on this team, like Gary Roberts, Darcy Tucker, and Ty Domi, and those were all good hockey players. None of those guys were goons. I mean, you want to call Ty Domi a goon? I mean, let's take a look at his HockeyDB page. Ty Domi wasn't a goon, and he would tell you that himself. In fact, he actually hates the word goon because he doesn't think what those guys were back then were goons. He calls them enforcers, and I would call him an enforcer because if you're looking at his penalty minutes, yeah, total enforcer. But if you're looking at his point totals, 28, 22, 20, 19, 29, 20, 13 goals, 15 goals, not exactly a Colt Noor or a Fraser McLaren. Now, if we're taking a look at Kyle Clifford here, not just his picture, because his picture makes him look like an absolute beauty, but just his numbers. Kyle Clifford is closer to what Ty Domi used to be for the Toronto Maple Leafs than what Colt Noor and Fraser McLaren were for those teams back in the early 2010s. Kyle Clifford, Ty Domi, both competent fourth-line players, but let's not mistake them for anything more than that. But if we're taking a look at the 03-04 team again, and specifically Gary Roberts and Darcy Tucker, those two would be luxuries on the Toronto Maple Leafs right now because they're skilled players who didn't take any shit. And if we're going to look at their HockeyDB pages here, Darcy Tucker was closer to a 40-point player than anything, might score you between 15 and 25 goals a season, and Gary Roberts had over 900 points and over 1,200 games played. So I just wanted to start the video with those comparisons because I think when people say that the Maple Leafs need to be tougher, I think that there's a disconnect. I don't think that many people understand what some people are saying when they say tougher because I think people automatically assume, oh, the Leafs need to go out and get guys like Colt Noor and Fraser McLaren again. And I hope that's not what those people mean because we don't need those players on the current Toronto Maple Leafs right now. We need a Gary Roberts. We need a Darcy Tucker. We need a Ty Domi. Those are the kind of tough guys that you want on your team. And those kind of guys are kind of scarce in today's NHL, so I understand people wanting to hold on to Kyle Clifford, but there's a price on those players, okay? Kyle Clifford is not Darcy Tucker. He is not Gary Roberts. He is a Ty Domi. He is a fourth-line player, and the Toronto Maple Leafs can't afford to pay fourth-line players anything really more than $1.5 million, $1.25 million, or $1 million. But going back to toughness, what does it mean to be tough? Because I think that we need to establish a definition of that in terms of the Maple Leafs' situation and in terms of today's NHL, because I think it has changed over the years. You know, Mike Babcock had that thing, our power play is our retaliation, and a lot of people really hated it. But Sheldon Keefe specifically, his Marlies teams were not afraid to stand up for each other. They weren't afraid to drop the gloves. They had some real tough customers on that team. But physicality isn't the only way that the Toronto Maple Leafs can show toughness on the ice, right? They can show toughness in the way that they respond to a goal against. They can show toughness by the way they respond to scoring a really big goal and the 5 minutes that take place after that. You know, a lot of people just like to hate on Mike Babcock and everything that he did here in Toronto, but there's a couple of good things that I like pointing out sometimes. The way that he talked about body language and the importance of it, especially when you're on the bench and you're on the ice after certain things happen, yeah, that's important. Showing a level of mental toughness and emotional toughness while playing hockey is part of being tough. It goes hand in hand with that physicality. So some people are kind of hard on Kyle Dubas for trading away Nazem Kadri, one of the guys that really responded physically when the team needed that. But, I mean, I love Nazem Kadri, but what I'm about to say about him I think is very honest. I actually think that he lacked toughness. He lacked that emotional toughness. He lacked that mental toughness when it came to playing hockey because you couldn't trust him in a 7-game series. You couldn't trust him to maintain his composure, and that's not being tough. And if the Maple Leafs, the current team, the guys on the roster just learned how to be mentally tough and emotionally tough when it came to hockey, I don't think that we would need that physicality element to it, because I think that would come once you have the other two. Team toughness isn't just something that one guy on the team does, or even two. It's toughness by committee, right? You all have to be mentally, physically, and emotionally tough together. So to answer my question from the beginning of the video here, do the Maple Leafs need more toughness? Yes. The answer is unequivocally yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean more physicality. I think the Maple Leafs would really benefit from the guys on the team already just gaining that emotional and mental toughness that needs to be there when you're playing hockey, and then that builds confidence, and then the physicality comes after that. Because if we're taking a look at this armchair GM here, and Chris Johnson said it on the most recent edition of the Steve Dangle podcast, but I said it before Chris Johnson here. I'm not going to get on my high horse or anything like that. I said the Pierre Engvall's spot on next year's team is not exactly safe, because in his last 19 games, he only has 1 point, 1 goal, and that was against David Ayres. And the Toronto Maple Leafs cannot afford to be paying a guy like Pierre Engvall $550,000 more than what league minimum is and just break even with his play. They need more value from him 5-on-5 and on the special teams to make his contract worthwhile. Now, the guys on LTIR are guys that I think the Maple Leafs could do without next season. Andreas Johnsson, I do think that he's traded right away. Chris Johnson also saying on the recent edition of the Steve Dangle podcast that he thinks 2 or 3 players are going to be traded off this roster. And there you go. There's 2. That fits what Chris Johnson was saying, and that fits what we've been saying on this channel for a very, very long time. Check out that episode of the Steve Dangle podcast if you haven't already. Chock full of information. But if we were to bury Pierre Engvall in the minors, because let's say we don't want to necessarily trade him just yet, because maybe he comes back up sometime next year and proves his value, and that he's worth that $1.25 million, it's going to cost the Maple Leafs $175K against the cap. And this option right here gives the Toronto Maple Leafs some depth, right? If you don't like Dylan DeMello, fine, you don't like Dylan DeMello, but that's a placeholder showing that the Toronto Maple Leafs can at least afford a defenseman making $3 million there. And they have more depth here, right? You got a guy like Pierre Engvall in the minors. You got a guy like Igor Korshkov still. You got a guy like Alexander Barabanov. You got Timothy Liljegren on the bench, and you still have $878K to go out and get a guy making league minimum to plug in on that fourth line. The only prediction that I'm not too confident in here is Ilya Mikheyev at $1.5 million for 1 season. He might come in at a little bit higher than that. Maybe it's a 2-year deal. I don't know. The logistics of that are kind of unknown because there's not really a lot to go of, right? I like Ilya Mikheyev, but he's not exactly a special player. I mean, he's really good skating. He's really strong on the puck, but he doesn't have the greatest shot. He's not the greatest playmaker, and those are the skills that you pay for. But hopefully Alexander Barabanov and Ilya Mikheyev sharing the same agent, Dan Milstein, kind of has a scenario where, hey, I'll scratch your back by signing one of your clients and playing him in the NHL if you could get me a little bit of a discount with your other client that's currently on my team. We've seen them score a lot of flashy goals. We've seen them talk the talk, but they haven't really walked the walk yet. Do the players on this team, do the players on this roster have what it takes to be mentally and emotionally tough? And I mean, I keep coming back to it. This stoppage in the NHL season right now is absolutely screwing the Leafs because it's not going to give them any of the answers that they need for this team and for the core of this team. We're not going to get that answer. Can this team be emotionally and mentally tough enough to win hockey games, to maintain leads and whatnot until the NHL comes back? And I mean, that's going to take some time. So that kind of goes hand in hand with what I was saying in a previous video. This is the sour taste that we're left with in our mouths. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and make sure to leave me a like on this video if you did like it, and subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And guys, remember, the Maple Leafs don't need goons. They don't need a Colton Orr or a Fraser McLaren. While I love them, while they were here, it's just not what they need right now. What they need is a guy like Gary Roberts. They need a guy like Darcy Tucker. They need a guy like Ty Domi. And the question is, can one of the guys or 2 of the guys on the team develop into those guys? Because there's not a whole lot of room to make any changes here. The improvements that we're going to see from this team are going to have to come from within.